The live-action remake of 1989's The Little Mermaid, 2023's The Little Mermaid, is finally available in theaters. The film is directed by Rob Marshall, who has directed other films for Disney, such as Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, as well as Into the Woods and Mary Poppins Returns. Outside of Disney, he also directed the film version of Chicago. The screenplay is by David McGee, who actually worked with Rob Marshall on Mary Poppins Returns, but he's also written for films like Life of Pi, Finding Neverland, and most recently A Man Called Otto. As far as the plot, it's pretty much the same as the 1989 film. Ariel, the Little Mermaid, desperately wants to live in the human world, so she goes to an evil sea witch named Ursula, who agrees to trade human legs for Ariel's voice. There are some slight and not so slight tweaks that they make in this movie. It has been a while since I've watched the original film, so I don't know how different this movie is from the original, but I remember enough to remember that there are certain songs that are in this remake that I don't think were in the original film. So I'd assume along with that, there's certain plot lines and story arcs that weren't in the original that they do in this film. But getting into the cast, as the Little Mermaid herself, we have Halle Bailey as Ariel. As Prince Eric, we have Jonah Hauer-King. As Ursula, we have Melissa McCarthy. As King Triton, we have Javier Bardem. Then as Sebastian, Flounder, and Scuttle, we have David Diggs, Jacob Tremblay, and Awkwafina. Officially getting into the review, I think all the actors involved did a great job in this movie. The lead, Halle Bailey, did a great job not only acting, but also singing. And I know there's some people out there that aren't a fan of them changing the color of Ariel's skin. That is something that doesn't bother me personally, as long as the actor in question is doing a good job, which I think Halle Bailey is doing an incredible job, then I really have no problem. Does she look exactly like Ariel? No, and I don't think she has to. In fact, I think that's one of the positive ways that this movie sets itself apart from the original. There are a couple of negative ways, which I'll get to in a bit, but as for Halle Bailey's performance, I think she's great. Said it once, I'll say it again. Oh my gosh, she is great at singing. It's just a shame that we couldn't hear just a little bit more of it because, you know, she gets her voice taken away for a certain majority of the movie. But getting into Jonah Hauer-King as Prince Eric, they gave a little bit more depth to the character of Prince Eric in this movie that I feel he didn't have in the original. He's actually a very likable character. I like the actor portraying him, very charming, very fitting for a prince in a Disney movie. Along with that, I think he has great chemistry with Halle Bailey. You can buy the romance between them. I mean, let's face it, they're both attractive, so that's all you really need. I also thought Javier Bardem was great as King Triton. He pulled off having the slightly more harsh side, which causes Ariel to want to run away. But he also has that lovable side to him that makes you like him and makes you want to root for him. But the biggest standout amongst the live-action cast is definitely Melissa McCarthy as Ursula. She absolutely thrives in this role and seems to have so much fun in it. I would say her performance alone is one of the big reasons to go watch this movie. Then when it comes down to the voice cast for the CGI characters, Sebastian, Flounder, Scuttle, I think all three actors are doing a great job with the voice acting. I believe all three of them have experienced voice acting prior to this film. But the issue I have with them leads me into my first negative. It is the design for the characters. For the CGI characters, they decided to take the Lion King remake route where they made the creatures look as realistic as possible, which in the end makes the characters seem emotionless. You hear the emotion in their voice, but you don't see it on their face because they're animals, right? They're fish, they're a crab, they're a pelican, I think. Animals don't emote the way that humans do, but I feel like they need to figure out some sort of system to make these characters emote just a little bit more. It's especially in the eyes. Like the character in particular I'm thinking of is Flounder. That's probably the worst CGI design in this movie. They completely desaturated him. And honestly, those eyes are just completely dead. I almost feel like these live action remakes should take an Enchanted or Rescue Rangers route where you have a lot of these characters be cartoon versions of the characters mixed in with the live action characters as well. Imagine how cool this movie would have been if while you were under the sea, Ariel, King Triton, all the little creatures were all cartoon, just like the animated movie was back in the day. but once you leave the ocean, it goes into live action. I mean, I know it's been done before, but hey, Disney's beating a dead horse anyways with these live action remakes, so why don't you beat a dead horse with the cartoon and live action hybrid? That's not to say this movie is bad the way it is, because I don't really think it is necessarily. I mean, I do have my complaints, but a lot of it is just the visual aspects of it. But anywho, I'm starting to ramble, so let's just get into the next thing. Onto a positive, and then I'll get into another negative, but the uses of color in this movie really worked for me. The trailers made this movie look really desaturated and murky, and I'll be honest, it does look like that at times. But sometimes when you're under the water, especially in that under the sea sequence, the colors really pop on screen. They know how to make the ocean look a little less scary than it actually is, but still aren't afraid to show those darker sides of the ocean as well. But on to another negative, the thing I was talking about before, the CGI. I think the CGI is not the greatest in a lot of areas in this movie. A lot of the underwater scenes, while they might have great uses of color, do not look realistic whatsoever, which again brings me to the point of why not just make it cartoon? But I think the CGI in this movie is just not up to par with what Disney is capable of doing. I mean, sure, it's not easy to accomplish wave water level effects, but a lot of these underwater sequences look horrible, especially when it comes to the mer people, the movements. They look very awkward, don't look very natural, I guess I would say. I mean, it's not easy to look natural because I guess they're fish people, but something about their body movements just feels really computer generated. But one last negative, and then I'll end off with a positive. They add a couple new songs to this movie, or at least I think they're new songs. They really didn't add a whole lot in terms of story or character development. I mean, I get that it's supposed to be a musical and the characters are supposed to sing their feelings, but I could do with a little bit less of that. They really just feel like they're added to say, hey, look at us, we're setting ourselves apart from the original. But it also feels like, hey, we're just filling runtime. And as for the runtime, it is almost an hour longer than the original film. But the last thing I have to say in terms of my review, one last positive, is that I really don't mind that runtime. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and sure, it could be trimmed in some areas, but for the most part, I enjoyed my time with this movie and might even recommend it. So when it comes to my ranking, 2023's The Little Mermaid is surprisingly a standard ticket. I really wasn't expecting much out of this movie. I don't expect much out of these live action remakes. But for the most part, I'd say they did it right with this one. They could have done it more right in some areas. Again, I feel like if they would have embraced the more cartoonish aspects of it and actually just made some of these characters straight up cartoons, it would have been better, but
that's my opinion!
But comment down below, have you seen 2023's The Little Mermaid? What did you think? How did it compare to the original? Have you not seen it? Are you planning on watching it anytime soon? Why or why not? Really, any comments you have for me, I would love to hear from you. I respond to as much as I can. But do me a favor and leave a like on this video, subscribe, hit that bell so I can grow human legs and become part of your world, and I will see you in the next one.